Hello, I'm Laura Valtorta. Welcome to episode 6 of my podcast, B is for Bisexual. This story is called Writers Group. We will meet Cristina Ladri, an irreverent, potty-brained attorney who is bursting with creative energy. Her relationships with men have all tanked. She wants to change her life to include more literary activity, more writing. Who will help? Her writers group, her grown daughter Prunella, or will it be sexy new friend Monica from California? Joining us in the reading are Marco, a computer scientist, and Dante, a musician. Don't forget to watch my films, including Bermuda and Disability, on channels such as Amazon Prime, Filmocracy, and Tubi. This collection of short stories, B is for Bisexual, is available on Kindle. And now, Writers Group. My novel Writers Group just won a National Book Critics Award. That's good, because considering what happened during the past year, I'm lucky not to be in jail. Last January, my life was scraping the bottom of the soup bowl. Prunella, my 26-year-old daughter, rarely ascended from her basement apartment except for meals. My special friend, Dr. John Cavendish, came over frequently and left rapidly after a fast fuck. Other than that, I had only surface friends. Every effort in my life was concentrated on my work as an attorney, Cristina Ladri, criminal defense and immigration lawyer. I called him Dr. John Cavendish to emphasize he was Jewish. He made a lot of money as a cardiologist. Some fool of a grandparent had decided to change the name, whatever it was back then, maybe Goldstein or Abramowitz, to Cavendish in an effort to appear English. Why would anyone want to hide their Jewish roots? You could tell at a glance he was Jewish from the curly dark hair and goofy smile. Jewish men were the sexiest, was my opinion for a long time. They were usually educated and fucked anything that moved. Dr. Cavendish was unwilling to leave his wife, however, which is why I was stewing. My good neighbor, Sally Jacobson, invited me to join her writers group. With that invitation, Sally graduated from being a surface friend to being somebody with depth. She recognized that I was lonely, and she took action to help. Sally had her own life as a musician and a married woman. She didn't even have to reach out, but we occasionally met at the Spectrum Cafe in Chapin, South Carolina, and she realized I was depressed. I've always loved to write poetry and weird stories. I just needed a platform. The Chapin Writers Group could have been stuffed with plastic fogies or Republicans, but instead they were a little more open-minded. They knew how to write well, and they recognized talent when they saw it. I read my story, Scintilla, about the premise. What if John Grisham were gay? The response from the group was ecstatic after they absorbed the shock.
I love it,
said Juan Gomez.
These characters are bizarre, and they look to the world with open eyes.
He was a retired history teacher with roots in Mexico City. I wondered how he would like my next story in the series, B is for Bisexual, about a school resource officer from Oaxaca.
Maybe you were trying to shock us,
said Petra Virag.
But the overall effect was small-town Newberry. Very original.
You know, this story moves me,
said Bob Walden, a retired Marine Corps officer from Charleston.
You know, I believe you could actually get it published.
He had tears in his eyes, which made me wonder. Thank you for the comments, I said. Getting something published is very difficult these days. Nearly impossible.
That's why we're here,
said Sally,
to get stuff published.
This group included some astonishingly good writers. Joseph Marmot, an insurance broker, was deep into a novel about paranormal communication between twins and the small-town murder of somebody with a large insurance policy. I couldn't wait to hear the next chapter. Sally had written some dramatic poetry that she planned to turn into opera. Juan was creating a chapter book for middle school kids about the evils of immigration policy in the U.S. from 1900 forward. But the best chapter I heard at that first meeting was by Petra, who was writing a novel about the Spectrum Cafe, the Chapin hotspot where we were meeting. She turned it into the Spectrum Laundromat, moved it to Columbia, and emphasized the quirkiness of the owner, Sam, a young guy with Asperger's syndrome, whose parents had set him up in business. He wanted to add a pastry shop and art gallery next door so that his weird friends from therapy would have a place to socialize and sell their bizarre art. His money-bag parents, ashamed of his inappropriate mannerisms and speech, wanted him to stick to the laundromat. But Sam had a vision that quirkiness sells and oddness puts people at ease. He makes a success of the cafe art business and attracts neuronormal people who seek a break from their gray suit lifestyles in the courthouses and South Carolina legislature. The words and the story by Petra mesmerized me. Jesus, I want to read the whole book, I told Petra. You should be able to get an agent and sell this.
I tried.
Said Petra.
49 rejections.
This left me baffled. I was a strong reader of novels, and I had never read anything like Spectrum Laundromat. Plus, with lots of people dealing with autism in their families, there had to be a market for this story. At my office the next day, while a client was droning on about transporting stolen goods in a UPS truck, I was thinking about Petra's book. Since the age of 26, I had practiced law diligently. After an ill-fated love affair with an ex-client who was killed shortly afterwards by a Mexican gang, I raised my daughter Prunella by myself and set aside money for our future. Maybe it was time to do something adventurous. Maybe I could be a book agent. Why not? I had the legal knowledge, and I knew about good writing. The plan was reinforced by Dr. John Cavendish and his bragging. Through business contracts, his wife had recently published a Jewish cookbook. Nobody wanted Jewish food, but since she was a well-known hospital administrator and philanthropist, the state university had relented, saying that her cookbook had cultural significance. Culture my ass. Helene had donated $1 million to the university. Maybe through trickery like that, I could get some real literature published. Prunella, I called down the stairway. Dinner, homemade tagliatelle. Prunella was a small, quiet woman with rodent eyes and swingy black hair like her father. By herself, out breezing along, she looked very attractive, just as I was an okay 50-year-old. But when we caught a movie together or went shopping for Christmas, we made a ridiculous pair. Nearly 6 feet tall, I appreciated my height and bushy brown hair during court appearances, but next to Prunella, I gave the impression of a predatory animal. I was the lion and she was the mouse. I wish she had some more friends. How's work going? I asked her as I grated real pecorino cheese for the pasta. For a web designer, she seemed to have a shitload of money in the bank.
Oh, it's wonderful,
she said.
I got a new client, Signatory Bank.
She smiled and looked out the window. Prunella was always saying things like this, touting new important clients, but I never saw the website she designed. I imagined that she had a secret life, like my great-aunt Lydia, who allegedly worked for the FBI, but I never knew what questions to ask Prunella. What will you be doing for Signatory? I asked.
A website.
That's bullshit. You have a different kind of job.
Oh yeah? Well, my concept track says I'm a web designer, and I make $50,000.
Whoa! Prunella offered no additional information. She was still fuming at me for forcing her to major in Italian and American history at the University of South Carolina, and for my refusing to pay for Stanford. She had wanted to major in computer science, but I considered that just a technical degree. California was out of the question, too. Too far away, too expensive. I didn't believe in debt. So Prunella loaded herself with artificial intelligence and robotics courses and took an extra year to graduate with a double degree in computer science. She hated me. It had taken me an hour to prepare the tagliatelle after a long day at work. Guess what? I don't think you're a website designer, I yelled, slapping the table. I think you're spying on bank customers who want to borrow money. Prunella shrugged her shoulders and took a third helping of salad. You know, I'm the one who paid for your college, even though you don't think USC was good enough. And right now, I have a project for you. We could be working together instead of fighting. Prunella put her dishes in the dishwasher and headed for the stairs. Dodd-Frank, I reminded her. I hope you're not just a hacker who hasn't read the Dodd-Frank law about protecting loan applicants. If Prunella was working on the side of banks, who probably sought to profile loan applicants, we needed to talk. The Ladris sympathized with the underdog. It would be great, I thought, to invite my daughter to be part of my literary agency, but she had to get over her anger. If she had friends, she might realize that everybody else her age was sinking under the weight of college debt. At the next meeting of the Chapin Writers Group, I had a business proposal for Petra. Why don't you let me go over your manuscript? I suggested while the others were on a bathroom break. First, register at the U.S. Copyright Office at www.copyright.gov. That way I won't be able to steal it. Petra looked at me terrified. I was about 10 inches taller than she was and louder. I bet you I can sell your book to a publisher.
But I've already tried.
Said Petra, leaning backwards, away from me.
And I went to book festivals.
I can try harder. You know I'm an attorney. In the end, she agreed to the contract with a 15% cut for me of any profits if I managed to arrange a publishing contract.
You got Petra to hire you as an agent?
Sally was impressed.
And you've only been part of the group for 2 weeks.
This is my new life, I told Sally. The new me after menopause. Part of what inspired me was revenge against Helene Cavendish, but I also knew that I could be an excellent book agent, ruthless, driven. That night, America's Got Talent was on television. Prunella deemed to wander upstairs and sit next to me.
You know, Mom, I'm really sorry that I was being so evasive yesterday about my new contract. You did pay for my college.
I looked at her, sad. Did she think our whole relationship depended on money? Did she blame me for being a stingy single parent? Your outfit is nice, I said. She wore some expensive satin, flowery pajamas like rappers wear in videos.
Okay, so it seems like you want to know. My job for Signatory isn't as a web designer, but, Mom, I can't really tell you what I do. I have top secret security status from the bank.
What? This sounded incredible to me, as I remembered how long it took to potty train my daughter. She was a rapid reader, but never wanted to put the book down and sit on the toilet.
You're about to say I was 3 before I got potty trained,
said Prunella, rolling her eyes.
Mom, I'm 26 years old now.
Not much different, I said to myself. Listen to this, I said, turning off the television. I want to start a literary agency, a second business. You know I majored in English, and I keep up with the writing scene.
Nobody's reading these days,
said Prunella.
Nobody has time for that.
They read stuff on their phones and on their tablets, I reminded her, and my writers group has some excellent writers.
You can't do it.
Said Prunella, folding her arms over her chest.
We're not in New York City and nobody knows who you are.
Telling me I cannot do something, I told her, is the best way to ensure I can, and I will.
Well, what do you want me for?
I thought you might enjoy a trip to New York City, get out of the house. Prunella was always trying to encourage me to move to the big city. I grew up on a farm and had no desire to live among crowds of people.
Okay, what do you really want me for, Mom?
You know, I do enjoy your company when you're not so snarky, but I want to target some big publishers and have you investigate their lives. Prunella couldn't help her lips from smiling.
Oh man, you've convinced me. That sounds like an adventure, like you're finally taking off your bra.
That's right, I can live a little now, because my daughter is smart and can take care of herself. We decided that it was best not to tell Petra about how exactly we planned to proceed. After doing some research, I found out that Princess Publishing was a big name in New York City, and they published the kind of strong woman books that I read, like Margaret Atwood, Attica Locke, and Ann Tyler, although Princess handled none of those writers. Prunella helped me to choose one of the editors from the website, who looked to be in her 40s with children and a house on Long Island. This is the one, I told Prunella, Dorothy Longfellow. She probably made up that last name, and maybe even the first name. Looks Jewish. She'll be concerned about her reputation.
You know you're gonna have to get permission from Petra, right?
Sure, but just for a friendly meeting. I called Petra and told her, hey, I just wanted to let you know that my daughter Prunella and I are traveling to New York City next week to meet with somebody from Princess Publishing. Yes, they handle all those biographies of Olympian women and some tough science fiction writers who are women. Don't get your hopes up. Princess is a big deal. Prunella and I just want to see a couple of shows and write it off on our taxes. It wasn't hard to get a meeting with Ms. Longfellow. We telephoned Princess and told them that we were a new agency handling Southern women's fiction. In fact, Petra's book, Spectrum Laundromat, was nothing of the kind. There were no magnolias involved or code words for bigotry. In fact, Petra was a Russian child psychologist married to a Danish professor of chemistry at USC. She just happened to be a woman living in the South. Princess allowed us a 15-minute time slot. The next step was a real mother-daughter bonding experience. Give me some dirt on this Dorothy Longfellow, I told Prunella. I can tell that you know how to do that. She went downstairs into her lair. 30 minutes later, she came upstairs with several pages of information. Dorothy lived on Long Island. She was the mother of 3. Her husband worked as a city water manager. They lived in a modern 7-bedroom house. Is it possible that Dorothy is cheating on her taxes, I wondered?
You know, I was actually thinking the same thing,
said Prunella. She handed me a copy of the Longfellow's taxes. Their real name was Morgenstern. For the past 5 years, they had neglected to report Dorothy's earnings. Voila! I think we should insist on hardback, paperback, and electronic editions of Spectrum.
Make sure to insist on it in advance then,
said Prunella.
because that's how we get paid.
In New York, we saw a Broadway show about Carole King and visited one of Prunella's favorite Apple stores. We heard a poetry slam at a club recommended by one of my clients. The next day, we sipped espresso milkshakes at a Polish diner and planned on meeting with Dorothy Longfellow. We could pretend we're in the mafia since our last name is Ladri. People assume that anyway, thanks to Mario Puzo and David de Cesare.
Yeah, I don't know. It might be dangerous to pretend that we're an illegal organization.
Said Prunella.
And restrictive. I actually have plans for my life.
I thought about her father, Armando, a low-level drug mule who was shot to death by his own boss, maybe because of his involvement with me. Armando had been a nice guy and a great lover who just fell on hard times. What kind of plans? I asked Prunella.
You'll see.
We could pretend you work for the IRS,
You know, I like that idea.
said Prunella.
Since I do work for them on occasion.
We put on our best clothing, fancy designer pajamas that felt comfortable and looked like pajamas. Mine were dark blue with pink flowers. Prunella had a yellow and pink set. She wore clunky high heels. I wore ballet flats. We both put on wool capes because it was February. The receptionist at the 22nd Street bed and breakfast stared at us as we walked out. Longfellow's office was in Hell's Kitchen, a nice place near the theater and the Round. We took a cab and then walked in. Possibly accustomed to creative types, the receptionist at Princess Publishing, whose name was Ping, led us directly to Ms. Longfellow's office.
Good morning, ladies.
Dorothy stood up from her desk. A tall woman, she was wearing a navy blue suit, white t-shirt, and fluorescent green Nike sneakers. It was sort of the same outfit I wore to my law office every day. Prunella and I looked ridiculous. If we had stuck to our usual work clothing, we would have looked more New York, even though that was what we wore in South Carolina. I'm Cristina Ladri, I said, and this is my daughter, Prunella, who works for the IRS. Dorothy pulled 2 chairs in front of her desk.
You don't look like you're related.
She said, smiling. I found that rude. Prunella placed her hand on my arm briefly to keep me from blowing up. Well, she is my daughter. She gets her smarts from me and her petite good looks from her father. Actually, I believe that Prunella's intelligence also came from Armando, who should have been the drug boss instead of just a runner. Dorothy picked up the manuscript.
Well, I must say that I loved reading Spectrum Laundromat. I couldn't put it down. Is this your first time agenting fiction?
Yes, but I'm a lawyer, so I know my way around contracts. Dorothy nodded.
You might find that using an assumed name helps, because writers will hound you to represent them.
I don't plan to advertise. There are enough good writers in South Carolina to keep me busy.
We always need Southern writers.
I nodded, remembering Petra's Russian heritage.
I have a nephew who's autistic. My sister is going to love this book, and my nephew, Jonathan, might like to read it too when he gets older.
We try to show the positive side of being strange, I said.
And what is that?
Dorothy smiled in a condescending manner. People who are strange are more interesting.
Maybe you're an expert on that.
Once again, Prunella placed her hand on my arm.
I think the writing here is excellent. Needs some editing. I've drawn up a contract for you and Petra to consider. Do you ladies want to go to lunch with me? There's an excellent Korean place around the corner.
Prunella and I agreed to this just for laughs. We both ordered bibimbap and iced tea. We chowed down on the rice while Dorothy talked about her husband and kids. She was glad to be back at work now after 5 years off, now that her children were in middle school. Her husband worked in city water. We already knew that. We listened and learned that books with agents behind them were considered a safer bet for publishers because at least one other person besides the writer found the book to be intriguing. Dorothy was nice to us, but I thought her world, Princess Publishing and all of its Jewish administrators, were ridiculous. There was not one black person or Mexican name on the list of employees that Dorothy described. I couldn't even spot an Italian-American name. We thanked Dorothy and promised to go over the contract that same day at our bed and breakfast. I had Petra on speed dial. Prunella and I changed to comfortable shoes from our bags and walked several blocks, not saying much. I like our life in South Carolina, I told Prunella. It's more diverse.
Yeah, when I move to California, I'm going to like it there too.
California? I saw my world dissolving. I would be all alone. Nobody to talk to. Neither of my two sisters, both realtors, were interested in hearing about the culture in the South or about criminal defense. My parents, when they were alive, had acted really mean about Prunella and her dead father. So, of course, I distanced myself from them when she turned 2 years old. Is this because you want to meet more Mexicans? Because of your father? Prunella rolled her eyes.
Mom, I have a new friend who lives in Pasadena.
This did not sound promising. You mean an online friend? That can be so dangerous. You have to take care of yourself.
His name is Mono, or as he pronounces it, Mono. He's invited me to live there. You know, I can do my investigative work anywhere. You should help me move there. Come and visit.
Mono means monkey. That sounds dangerous.
Yeah, and my Spanish is pretty good, you know. His real name is Lorenzo, and he works in a bank. But his real passion is guitar. He went to grammar school at a place run by nuns and has an interest in learning Farsi.
Great, an intellectual boyfriend. Maybe we could team up together on the Ladri Literary Agency.
You did just fine in there without me.
You know, Prunella was right. I made a show of pouting for a couple of days, but in my heart, I was glad to hear that Prunella was expanding her world beyond my basement apartment. Petra was ecstatic about the book deal. She got a $10,000 advance, and my percentage was $1,500 plus the cost of the trip to New York. Not much moolah, but I felt as though I had accomplished something. Nobody in the Chapin Writers Group had ever sold a book before. We set to work editing the words and approving cover designs. I felt compelled to do this agenting work again and keep plowing forward until I could quit practicing law. Prunella was planning to move to an apartment in Pasadena that she had seen online. I convinced her to travel there by plane before signing the lease. It's a good thing we went, because the place was a shithole. Mono was cute like a monkey, but he had no taste in housing. He wore a red bandana on weekends and rode a bicycle. He and Prunella spent their whole time touring Los Angeles via the subway while I looked at houses. The worst deals were in South Pasadena. Small bungalows for $1 million each. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths. The right thing to do is buy one of these overpriced bungalows, I told Prunella at the hotel. How much have you got in savings?
$500,000.
Holy shit! I guess you can afford to live in California.
It's thanks to you, Mom. I haven't paid rent in 4 years.
Well, you can't put everything on a house. Why not put up $250,000? I'll pay the other half of the down payment, and we'll go in for joint ownership of the house.
I wanted a place of my own.
Well, this is the way I see it. In 5 years, I'll be moving out here to California to be near you and your kids with Mono. Then you can buy me out and go for a mansion in Irvine or Palm Springs, depending on how well you do with your business. Prunella nodded. I'll be back and forth for 5 years at least, and I want the bigger bedroom. My daughter snagged the bigger bedroom, but my window was facing the garden. She thought about putting in a pool, and I agreed. We bought the house right away. Back in South Carolina, I was missing my writers group and Sally. There was so much potential there, so much weirdness. While I began to close out my law office, I wrote about the freaks around me, the clients and the writers. What better subject material? None that I could see. As for Dr. John Cavendish, he really began to bore me. Goodbye, I told him over the phone. Don't come back. Enjoy your money. Prunella, who was listening, put her hands on her hips.
Well, it's about time, Mom.
My own book was called Immigrants at first, until I changed the title to Writers Group. The immigrants made good subject material. I thought a lot about Armando and turned him into a writer, brought him back to life, and let him join the group. We were all immigrants after all. Prunella read through it and said nothing. Sally started a book about the perils of motherhood. A lot of women were into that kind of despair. I read the other books by my new friends, deciding what to represent. The insurance guy began exploring the world of integrating the insurance industry. That caught my eye. Meanwhile, I was going back and forth to California every 3 months and watching Prunella's life unfold. She went from mono to a different guy in the group named Pedro. She and Pedro got married. I waited for kids, trying to keep my mouth shut. Every once in a while I said, "Hey, I want grandchildren." Pedro and Prunella moved to Pasadena, and I took the bungalow for me. I painted it green and named it the Wonder House. After a year, I had 2 manuscripts in hand, Policy Black and Writers Group. That was my book. Princess wanted the novel about insurance integration, much edited by me, but they had no interest in my story about illegal immigrants who escaped detention and wrote bad poetry.
We like Southern literature,
Dorothy reminded me. She had no fucking idea what she was talking about, but she offered my man Marmot $25,000. My cut was $3,000. There was no way I could quit being a lawyer. I couldn't afford it. I began to study for the California bar. Prunella called me.
I'm expecting a baby,
She said.
Oh my God, being pregnant sucks, especially the morning sickness.
You've got it, I said, and raising the brat will be worse. Congratulations. Once off the phone, I did an exhilaration dance to Wonderful Day by Max Sauce. Then I began to obsess about babysitting. Prunella was pretty engaged in her investigative work, and she was shoveling in the money. If I gave up practicing law and moved to California for a life of writing, she might force me to babysit all the time. I had no patience for crying babies. That night at the Chapin Writers Group, my friends were adamant about me not moving to California.
You got me this excellent contract,
said Joseph Marmot.
My friends from the Columbia Group are so jealous of me that their eyes are green. We need you in South Carolina. Don't sell out and move out west.
Sally thought I was crazy to consider it.
Let Prunella and Pedro raise the baby. You have such a free lifestyle here. I would kill for your life.
Still, the call of grandparenting was tugging at my heart. Once little Juanita was born, I shoved my calendar free and vowed to stay in South Pasadena for a month. It was lucky I never rented out the place. My writers group manuscript was finished, and I arranged meeting with 3 West Coast publishers. Because Spectrum Laundromat had stayed on the fiction bestseller list for 2 weeks and earned me about $10,000, I could pretty much choose my meetings with publishers. They knew I had good taste. Prunella's house in Pasadena was a banker's dream of beige bad taste, but the sight of my granddaughter was like a jewel in heaven. She had curly dark hair, brown eyes, white skin, and I could tell she was promising to be very tall. I needed to tell Prunella that the baby's eyes reminded me of Armando. Once I picked her up, I couldn't stop kissing her face.
Be careful,
said Pedro.
She's only 3 weeks old.
Be careful nothing, I said. This baby is 25% Italian. Pedro rolled his eyes. I had shown up during Prunella's work time, and she was locked in her office until dinner. Pedro also left me and the baby alone so he could take a nap. Juanita and I checked out the backyard. April in California was like heaven, only surpassed by October in my opinion, and the flowers and birds were abundant. Juanita and I checked out everything, including the yappy dog next door. I loved the entire world with that baby in my arms. When Prunella came out to fix dinner, I noticed the baby hunkered over, clung to me, and did not want to leave my arms. "Look, she's hugging me," I said.
She's absolutely giving you a giant hug.
We all ate frozen pizza and ice cream. The next day, I went from South Pasadena to downtown LA on the metro system. I never saw any reason to have a car in the Los Angeles area. The public transportation was excellent and deserved my patronage. My first meeting was with international publishers, with Monica Sachs. She specialized in turning books into movies. That interested me because I could make some real money that way. Monica had long curly brown-gray hair and sepia skin. She wore jeans and a bead necklace. I thought that she must be part African American, yet my hair was bushier than hers. I could have never gotten mine that long without going crazy. How'd she do it? Monica brought me a raspberry La Croix water, my favorite. I think that, plus her smile that made her eyes close, was why I fell in love with her. She had posters of rappers on the wall. I knew from all the research done by Prunella that Monica was a lesbian, or at least she had been in a female-female relationship for 10 years until the other woman left her to marry a director. At first I was going to use that knowledge to blackmail her. This plan backfired big time. The idea of that kind of sex didn't interest me until I was in the room with Monica and noticed how tall and thin she was. I wished I weighed 50 pounds less. "I live in South Carolina," I told her after we got over the exclamations of how good Writers Group was and how fun it was to read. "But I'll be moving to South Pasadena soon because of my new granddaughter."
You're gonna love that town,
said Monica.
They have a wonderful farmer's market.
"Oh, really?" I knew every inch of the farmer's market. "I wish you could show me around sometime. I don't have any friends in California." The cow-punching forwardness of my approach astonished me. Already I could envision myself selling my office building and my house and moving to the Golden State to write novels and screenplays. This decision to move to California was cemented by Juanita and by Monica. Afterwards, I cherished that decision because my literary agency and my writing only got better. I never lost touch with the Chapin group because they traveled to see me. The second bedroom at the Wonder House was always a guest bedroom, and I added a full bath. Sometimes Juanita slept over, and she had her own closet. Other times it was occupied by Joseph Marmot or by Sally Jacobson, and they grew to love California as much as I did. Monica, when she stayed over, always slept with me. The end.